time for Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnet Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here.
With Barnet Bain. Good moment. It's like a hairy morning here. Woo!
We're flying.
We are flying. We're flying.
Every once in a while we like to do this.
Yeah, we do. It's always important that it comes together and looks like we're totally tucked in. Fortunately, our crack producer, Spence, is always tucked in.
He is.
Thank you for being here, Spence. Nice, nice. So, Freeman, good morning.
Good morning. Good moment.
Good moment. Yeah, good moment.
We've had a fun
We have
moments.
You know, we before we walked into the studio, we sat, as we quite often do, not always, but quite often, we sat at our local coffee shop and caught up a little bit. It was very interesting. You pointed out how fascinated. When I sat down with you, you were fascinated in the sort of doing this very French people walking thing.
Watching, yeah.
Watching. And
walking, too.
Walking.
They were walking and we were watching.
Yeah. And you are so captivated.
I love it. I love eavesdropping. I love actually getting up and putting like something in my coffee or going to the restroom or whatever, because there's all these lives and I hear bits and pieces of conversations that, you know, lives that are so foreign to me, or lives that could be my life, conversations I've had in my life that aren't my conversation. You know, we talk on this show a lot about our conversation. And that's both literal, the conversation we've been having, and also metaphorical for the larger conversation, because what I see is how much everything in my experience is feeding the conversation I'm having.
How
right?
connected, in other words, how connected every single thing is with the center, with you as the center. How
totally.
Somehow everything seems to be bend in relationship to where you are coming from.
And to get the snapshot of someone else's, let's call it reality,
yeah.
and kind of marvel at, like, wow, so their world is organizing around that story, right? Yeah. Or that particular interpretation.
Well, that's your story.
It is my story. And where I see this amplified is in things like conspiracy theories, like the folks who love the newest conspiracy theory because it affirms the whatever it is, the
duality of the subject-object field.
Exactly.
It's a good story.
It's a good story. It's compelling.
You know, any of these stories, as long as we can perceive or conceive of these stories, whether or not we're totally hooked into it, they are consistent with our fundamental belief structure. So own it. But we have
the biggest story of all is the God story.
The God story. That's a good story, too. That's
as good as it gets. Yeah. Come on.
Fortunately, we have somebody with us today, listeners, who can speak to that story. We're really pleased and very grateful to have my very old friend, Neale Donald Walsch, with us. Neale, for the one or two of you who have been living under a rock,
yes,
is the author of the Conversations with God series, which I think is somewhere on the order of 10 million books sold or some astronomical number like that, along with, I think in total, some 27 or 28 books, far more than you and I have ever read. And his latest, God's Message to the World, is available now at your booksellers, wherever you buy books or borrow books. And we are very, very pleased to have you with us. Neale, how are you?
Welcome to the show, Neale.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. But don't make fun of me, because if you do, you're all going to hell.
That's right.
That's a good story, too. But I'll see you there.
Yeah. The hell of our own creation, right?
So exactly.
The last time you and I had a conversation on the phone, a really terrific conversation a while ago, and we were talking a little bit about enchantment, the idea that everything is somehow connected to everything else, and that every single aspect of that you experience of your reality is drenched with meaning. And
well, you know, you guys are in the movie business, so you know, Barnet, all about the scripts that are written around that very idea, not the least of which is The Matrix, which is exactly focused on that notion that every single thing is interconnected. and for a larger purpose. I'm not sure that I agree with the purpose of that the Matrix put out there, but I think that those brothers really had an idea that, so there's something going on. The point being, there's something larger going on here in the universe, I mean, and on Earth, than simply, a random series of events to which we find ourselves, subjected, but rather that there's a process in place, and the process has a very real purpose and a very real objective. And that's a point of view that I hold about life, and that many people are now starting to see could very well be true. And if it were true, then the question arises, what, if any, is our role in that process? That's the key question, and I think that's the question, and once it's answered, that will revolutionize humanity's experience on this planet.
Well, in 1 second, we're going to ask you what you believe that role is, but certainly, as more and more people seem to be waking up, certainly people who tune into this program are very, very interested in these ideas, and more folks are beginning to consider the possibility that every single thing around them is alive and singing our own divine praises. Everything is singing my name.
And it's unique, and that it's a signature experience that is unique, that there's multiple, well, for some folks there's very few options, that the threads or the storylines of their particular reality or experience are consistent.
Small, tight story.
Yeah. And then there's the broadening, where we recognize, I think, that there are lots of different parallel, this coffee shop conversations. There's all these parallel conversations. And going back to what I was bringing up, what conversation are we in?
Yeah.
I think the real question is, what should be the content of that conversation? Should we be talking about our exterior realities, our exterior events, our exterior experiences, that is those that occur outside of our body, essentially, or should we be talking about our interior realities, our interior experience, that is what's happening inside of our mind, and if I could use the word, inside of our soul, what's going on inside of us, with regard to the apparently random series of events that are occurring outside. And I bring that up only because if we start focusing on what's occurring interiorly, we will discover then that that is the one thing about our reality that every person in the world, every single being on the planet, in fact, can control. Now, there's a direct link, it seems to me, between our willingness and therefore our ability to control our interior experience and the exterior experience to which we find ourselves exposed. That is, one has an impact on the other.
They are linked. Yes, at some point, the interior and the extrinsic experience, follows the energy of the interior experience. I think that's what I'm hearing you say.
Well, that's right. That's the answer to the question. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? But what comes first is the interior experience of any exterior event.
The yolk.
Now, the exterior event has to occur first in the first instance, but once it does, our interior event of that exterior experience begins to produce future exterior experiences of a similar nature. Mm-hmm. So that's the purpose of the process of growth, of the process of evolution. There's very few of us right now anymore these days who have not had every exterior event we're ever going to experience. That is, we've all experienced betrayal, we've all experienced upset and frustration, surprise and joy as well, love, anger. We've experienced all of the. By the way, when I talk about exterior events, I'm talking about events that produce emotions. That produce emotion, energy in motion, because all of life is energy, and every event is a process of energy moving around. So, at the ages that we are at, in fact, most people, when they get beyond 20 or 25 years of age, have experienced virtually the entire gamut of exterior emotional occurrences. Now, how we respond to those interiorly begins to generate exterior emotional experiences in our future. And so one thing does affect the other, and that's what the process of evolution is all about. If humanity ever decided that what I'm saying is true, I promise you life would change on this planet in 24 hours.
Well, there's a few folks that especially folks listening to this show, that this concept is very true. And that is a game changer, what Barnet was sort of speaking about in this awakening. The challenge, of course, with this is awakening often is held as a single event. And in my experience, and perception of this is that it's a constant awakening, because it's almost as if we're catching up with our own consciousness when we see that the world that is appearing to us is a reflection, right? It's a reflection of what's going on in our own processes.
It's the holodeck.
It's the
on
holodeck.
Star Trek, yeah.
But see, then what's interesting about that, what's challenging about that is what we experience then is brings out in us, there's an evolutionary impulse in what's being reflected, right? So it's like my consciousness catching up with what I'm creating in the spirit that you were talking about, Neale, where we recognize that where we're putting our attention seems to then generate some kind kind of, sorry, I forgot to turn off my ringer. That's
wow,
so unprofessional.
You have just did a radio sin.
Yes. Now I got to catch up with myself, speaking of catching up. But did you get the thread that I was heading towards, Neale?
Yes, absolutely, and you're profoundly correct. And when Barnett said the holodeck, he's right. I mean, Gene had a great idea there, and Gene had a whole bunch of great ideas.
One or two.
He understood. I'm sorry?
He had one or two good ideas.
Yeah, one or two. and that idea of the holodeck was a perfect metaphor for what we're talking about here right now. You know, as you think, so shall it be. I know that sounds so trite and so used, almost old anymore in the so-called New Thought community, but it may be old in the hearing of it. I don't think it's old yet in the applying of it. That is, many more people have heard about this than are actually using it.
That's so true, particularly in this New Thought community, where so much of what has been said is now so brittle because it has been said and said and said and said. But as you point out, we have been processing this information largely at the cognitive level and not so much as a embodied somatic experience. And so, yes, this goes back way back. Solomon in the Song of Songs said that there is nothing new under the sun. This goes way back. But we have been so infatuated with logic and reason and so confounded by our own love affair with data that we have not had an embodied relationship with these ideas. So when we begin to tune into self-knowing, that is not a head trip.
I think that the problem is to identify it and to define it specifically, our story of separation. I think that it's not just that we're infatuated with data and information, but we are deeply infatuated with a cultural story that has run through humanity's experience from the earliest days of our understandings of life itself and of the thing that we've come to call God. In those days, we call it by a wide number of names, but we always thought from the very earliest days there's something larger than us out there in the universe. That ultimately developed into a thing called religion or faith, and the religion is based on a fundamental story of separation. That is, God is over there someplace, or this exterior power, whatever it is, this higher power is over there, and we are over here, and never the twain shall meet, except perhaps, according to certain faith traditions, on Judgment Day, when we'll get our just desserts. But other than that, the power is over there, and we're over here. That's what I call separation theology. Now, guys, a separation theology is okay as far as it goes. Unfortunately, it doesn't stop there. A separation theology produces a separation cosmology. That is a cosmological way of looking at things that says that everything is separate from everything else, interdependent perhaps, but separate nonetheless. The problem with that is that a cosmology of separation produces a separation psychology. That is, individuals who have a psychological profile that separates themselves from everything and everyone else, including life, including the thing that we call God. Even that wouldn't be so bad if it stopped there, but it doesn't stop there, because that produces a separation sociology. That is, entire societies, entire segments of people on this planet, nations, races, cultures, religions, political parties, that imagine themselves to be separate from each other. And even that, if it stopped there, wouldn't be so bad. But sadly, and here's the end of the line, all of that produces ultimately and observably a separation pathology, pathological behaviors of self-destruction.
That
was quick.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
We'll be chewing on that for the next.
So I'm chewing, and I'm going to swallow. It'll take me a while to chew that, but I will swallow. That was a magnificent tour de force presentation of the way that we relate to narratives and what we do around narratives and stories. We, from a very, very early developmentally, a very, very early age, whether it's personally or whether it is as a race, we seek to make sense of something beyond our logic by shoehorning it in to something with a straight line, a beginning, a middle, and an end, and an if-then mentality that allows us to rationalize our experience for our own developmental brains. And what you're saying is it takes us inevitably so far down the rabbit hole that it becomes pathological. It becomes the most disempowered narrative of all, of separation, becomes somaticized. It becomes embodied personally and collectively. I'm going to ask you to comment on that, Neale, but first we have to add one more layer of separation here, and that is the separation for commercial breaks, because we all know that the bills must be paid. We'll be right back with Neale Donald Walsch after words from these good people.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
Oh boy, we are so glad that you are still with us, that you did not tune away. I'm always amazed at that because I have no attention span, and 20 seconds in the car and I'm off to something else. So thank you for being with us. We're here with Neale Donald Walsch.
Doing a little unpacking.
A little unpacking before the break. Neale shared with us a spectacular narrative about how we got to where we are, how we are so dissociated. And I wanted to throw it back to you, Neale, and ask you what you thought, if you had anything to reflect upon, vis-a-vis our relationship with not only these stories, but these stories as the template for all story making.
Yeah, I think that if humanity ever decided that its original story, or is the first story that it really faithfully passed on, which is the story of separation, if humanity ever decided that its original story was in fact inaccurate, that there's something we don't fully understand here about God and about life, the understanding of which would change everything. If we ever fully embrace that notion, I promise you that, and then began to explore what the truth of the alternate story, or the real story might be, I promise you that life would change radically on the earth within a very short period of time, within a veritable blink of an eye. So the trick is to use our communications media these days. It's happening, by the way. It's happening more and more. We're seeing more movies. We're seeing more television programs. We're seeing more books and pieces of art in every form, plays and musicals and all sorts of things. We're now beginning to find that a new story for humanity is being told to humanity by humanity, because humanity itself is understanding that humanity is losing patience with itself. We're sitting here saying, wait a minute, these can't be the answers. I mean, come on. Nothing on our planet is working. Our political system is not working. Our economic system is not working. Our educational system is not working. And our spiritual system is certainly not working. What is there that we don't fully understand here, the understanding of which would change everything? But we can't do it confrontally. That is, we can't just walk up to the human race and say, guys, you got it all wrong. We have to find another way to insert that idea. So what's happening in all of the communications arts, the film business not the least of them, is that we're starting to see messages that are seeking into the common culture where people can sit back and agree with it without feeling made wrong about it. That's very, very exciting to me, and I think that's going to happen increasingly in the years just ahead.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. One of the things that happens when that original story is interrupted, when it's recognized and acknowledged to be so, and identified as being misguided and unhelpful,
inaccurate.
When that happens, what it precipitates is literally a heartbreak. There is a tremendous amount of healing. It seems to me that we are all in arrested development from precisely the point that we buy into that story. And it happens to every individual on the planet in their own timing, and usually very, very, very early. But we lose more and more of ourselves until at some point we are wholly committed to that story. And when you start to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, there is tremendous healing to be done, which to me speaks to the importance of developing a capacity to experience compassion, to let in compassion, and to deliver compassion and active caring.
It's very understandable that all people, including at a very young age, are embracing that old notion, that old story of separation, because guess what? With very few exceptions, that's the story they're being told. I mean, the sins of the father
Mom and Dad.
in fact, being visited upon the sons unto the seventh generation. So someone has to start telling them a new story. That's the challenge before humanity right now. Because as soon as you start telling the new story, everyone gets it. You know, there's an intuitive understanding. When we hear that new story, we go, you know what? That's it. That's the missing data. In the book that I've just finished writing, it's called God's Message to the World, and the subtitle is, You've Got Me All Wrong. This is God's message to the world. You guys, you got me all wrong. It isn't like that. It's like this. And so that when we start putting those new stories into the marketplace of ideas, which this book does, in a very forceful, dramatic way, people sit up and take notice, and they say, you know, what if? They start asking the great what if. What if what we thought was true about ourselves, about life, about each other, about the whole process, about the whole reason we're even here? What if those things were either not true or at least not totally true? What if that old story is inaccurate? One more analogy I'd like to make, which I often use. I think we are like little children, guys, who have learned adding and subtracting. They've learned how to add and subtract, and we think that's all there is to mathematics.
Right. Well,
Wait, there isn't? There's more?
This is a kind of spiritual maturing. I mean, I think that the way of embracing this that doesn't become positional, right? The challenge of understanding this only at the level of individual, because when it doesn't mean that collections of people can't recognize it and then recreate community and reimagine a world, but it doesn't happen because someone declares it so. It happens because developmentally, it's a maturation. There's a level of, and when I say this, I even cringe a little bit. There's a level of consciousness. The minute I say that, I'm like, because it doesn't feel generous in the way that so often I hear it in the world. But that is it. There's a point at which we personally begin to own the holodeck, the reflection. And there's what I think you were talking about, Barnett, this sort of healing, this reconnecting of pieces of the puzzle within ourselves, where we see ourselves as the creator of all of it, at least in the way we experience it, but maybe more directly. And then that becomes its own expression out in the world.
I'm going to give you a new word to use instead of consciousness that'll help you in the future. My suggestion, I use the word awareness. I think all of us are conscious. And I think, frankly, the reason I don't like to use the word consciousness is that you're right. It sounds as if I'm more conscious than you are. The fact of the matter is, my experience has been all human beings have a very high level of consciousness embedded in them as a natural part of who they are, but not all human beings are aware of it. There's an old saying, it's one thing to know something, it's another thing to know that you know. Yeah,
we're all dreaming every night, and some may say all day as well, but not everyone is lucid, and not everyone is lucid to the same degree every night and equally all day long.
And there's also another piece to this, which is that the evolution, the growth, is not finite. So it's always the next layer of growth. There becomes a growing orientation where it's almost like approaching this experience of what's being reflected back with a level of curiosity, with a level of
the what if that Neale spoke about,
and the ongoing discovery that it's always ongoing, and that in and of itself becomes a sort of impetus, right?
Mm-hmm.
The universe has no intention of stopping its own expansion. You're perfectly right. You mentioned this earlier in our conversation. And thanks for bringing it up again, because that's what's true. If we think there's an end line, an end game to this, we're totally wrong. As soon as you get to the highest place of consciousness that you imagine is possible, the game itself expands, because God has no intention of this ever ending.
And that's good news.
It's the best news of all.
Yes.
It's the most extraordinary news of all. That's a process that we loosely call evolution. And the process of humanity's evolution, our spiritual as well as our physical evolution, never, ever, ever ends.
This seems like a non sequitur, but I have a feeling that it's going to thread in something, in some wonderful way. For some reason, I moved to share this idea of there was this animated film, Flatland. Do you remember a film called Flatland, Neale or Freeman?
I didn't see it.
Yeah,
so it was a story, animated story about a line, a dot, just a dot on a piece of paper, and the dot, what appears as a dot in 3D. When you're looking at it, eventually the dot lifts and lifts and lifts off the page, so that it suddenly appears as a circle, and then it lifts and lifts and lifts and continues to lift until it has depth, height and depth. And you realize it's a sphere. It looks like a little marble, and it continues to rise and rise and rise, and now it's the size of a basketball, and pretty soon it's the size of a weather balloon, and then it's bigger than the Earth and bigger than the sun. We have no idea, as this what appeared to us in one set of dimensional perspectives as a grain of pepper on a piece of paper, in 3 dimensions with volume added. Is something that is monumental in size. Likewise, we don't have any sense of where this is going or how it is all proceeding. We're being attracted into a great coming home, a great communion with mystery itself, without any idea of how this is going to turn out and in what ways it's going to turn out. We cannot know that from here, but we can saddle up for the joyride. Well,
and that leads us to the final statement here for me, which is that what you've just said is not a non sequitur at all. It's a beautiful explosion at the end of our conversation. But what I would say then is, with that having been said, we get down to then, okay, if that's unknown and can't be known, can never be known, then what the hell is my purpose here? And it turns out to be, oh, I get it. It's for my purpose is my own expansion, which I can know, which I can experience at the next highest level, and the next, and the next, and the next. So suddenly I see within that larger unknowable context something which is knowable. I can know me. I can know how magnificent and utterly incredible I am being right here and right now, and I can make a new decision about what that's going to be tomorrow, and the whole of my life can be a participatory process in the experience of my soul's separate individual evolution.
I love that. And I love the illustration, Barnet, because here's where I can personalize that. There's a refocusing, right, as this image begins to grow, or as my awareness begins to grow. And there's these moments in between where I'm lost, right, where the road is lost, where I'm confused. I haven't quite formulated what that is.
The dark wood.
Yeah. And I mean, look, just this show, 4.5 years that Barnet and I have been doing this, there's these interesting moments where the conversation, this analogy of the conversation, which is my life, which is my awareness, right, where it gets lost. And I'm scrambling to find focus, right? And the tendency is to want to crunch down to what was there before. And if I squint, I can still kind of see it.
That's called
right?
fundamentalism.
Well, of course it is. But the wisdom is to know enough not to squint and try to keep it, that its impulse is to grow. And so there's this constant sort of, focusing, and then refocusing, and then refocusing. But those moments in between, if I'm honest, are slightly, very unnerving, right?
It's a beautiful chaos. Neale, you have anything to add to that?
Well, I was going to say, I think the opportunity for us is to, as human beings, is to embrace the mystery and solve it by solving the mystery, by allowing ourselves to notice that we don't really want to solve it completely.
No, exactly.
That's it.
I mean, when you
That's
said,
the challenge.
it has been said before, but not necessarily with the same exquisite basso profundo that we get from Neale. But it has been said before that it is to know thyself. And when you said it, it rang true. It rang so true for me that, yes, of course, I can't, you can hear it and hear it and hear it, but never hear it enough. Never hear it enough.
I love what Bill said. Bill said, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy.
Exactly.
I'm glad that you're on a casual basis with Bill.
He is.
I'd
like to get Horatio on the show.
Yeah.
I think Horatio just doesn't get any of the attention
That's
he should.
a really important piece, because the wandering, the lost space. You've brought this up actually before, Barnet, that in our the collective story, that the wandering, is so discredited. The space of not knowing has been so diminished. And it's
not all who wander are lost, although many are.
Right. Well, and it's okay to get a little lost.
Well, the space of not knowing is the holiest space. We're in trouble when we think we know.
Yeah, Barnet and I've called this
all the trouble, all the challenges and problems, human problems that have been created on the planet, have been created by people who were dead certain that they knew. That's
that fundamentalism piece. We've called it the sacred I don't know. This sort of embracing of the lostness, wherein we're expectant, right, that something will emerge, and that's the piece that's so critical. Is that we do have a sense. I don't know if the word is hope, a healthy expectation, that there is some way that this will come back into focus, this moment of confusion.
Let me offer something. The reason that the I don't know is the sacred I don't know is because it is the space of pure creation. When you think you know something, creation ends. The end of creation is reached when we think we know. So the sacred not knowing is the space where we get to then make it up, create it as we would have it be. And that's where the true magic of being human is.
Now you have me wound up. It never fails that the closer we get to the end of the show, the more excited I get. I mean, it's so true. I think it was Picasso that wrote someplace that it is only by creative acts that the world is born anew, that we discover more of who we are, and that is because in the act of creativity, you are shattering an old condition. All you have to do is be on a movie set with Billy Crystal or somebody, and says, and we don't have the ending for the scene. We have no way to end the scene yet. We don't know. Crystal says, let's make it up. Roll the cameras, and he makes it up, and it's fantastic. Exactly. He makes up 9 of them. It's like being on board, like hanging out with the Shriners Convention. You get 9 or 10 of them. That's right. So the space of not knowing is the space of pure creation. And that's what makes it sacred.
And what's so brilliant, though, because it's set against a backdrop of knowing, so there's a lot of preparation involved in getting to a space where we can put down our knowing in favor of something. You become, in the archetypes, you become a fool after you gain mastery. Right. After you gain mastery, you understand the next most powerful truth is that on the shoulders of this, I know nothing. But on the shoulders of this, unfortunately, we are fast approaching the end of our time together. Before we leave, Neale, we want to our listeners to know where they can learn more about God's message to the world. Hopefully, they'll all rush out to Amazon and they'll get their own copy, as I have. Yeah, what you can do is go to godsmessagetotheworld.info. For more information, godsmessagetotheworld.info. Great. And we will have this info as well on the Cutting Edge Consciousness website. Neale, thank you so much. Next time you're in LA, we got to get you in studio. We saw you at the Birth 2012. That was a gas, but we'll have to get you back down here again. Great. Love to do it. Be well. Love you. Take care. Bye. And for those of you listening, we invite you to stay tuned because Barnet and I will be back after the break to wrap things up here on Cutting Edge Consciousness.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here with Barnet Bain.
Yes, indeed. That was a fun time. Any time with Neale is
love that guy.
Is a joyride. It was great.
How he ran through that whole narrative was crazy.
Yeah, I need to take a little time and
go back and listen to that. I
just need to go and listen to it
well, they get the books out. That's good. People can just get the book.
Yeah.
But I like that it's done in 60 seconds or less. You know, that's a doozy right there.
It's fabulous.
That's stream of consciousness. You know, that channeling, downloading stuff that he does is good. He and Billy Crystal, right?
You know, 20 years since the first conversations with God. That's how quickly that went by. Like,
it did.
20 years.
Wow.
Amazing.
It is.
I have to tell a quick story.
Yeah.
So in 1999, I was at an event in Denver where I met Neale, and there was going to be a screening, an audience testing of a film that I was working on, and I invited Neale. So he shows up. He's rented some kind of, we can't get it, it's raining, it's pouring rain. He's rented some sort of, some old limousine. It's ancient. We get into the limousine and we are hurtling in the rain down this freeway. And I ask him about conversations with God and how it is to constantly be confused by so many people who think, well, you alone have a direct access to God. And in that moment, the door on our limousine, the back door, literally flies off. It flies open, and then it gets. You know how
act of God.
You know how old. This is an old Lincoln. You know how old Lincolns, they have suicide doors, so they open the wrong way.
Yeah.
It opens the wrong way, gets caught by the wind, and gets ripped off. The whole door gets ripped off, and the elements are pounding into the car, and he doesn't. I'm freaked out. He doesn't miss a beat. He just looks at me totally deadpan. Totally deadpan. And he says, don't mess with God.
Kind of like he started the show. You're all going to hell.
You're all going to hell.
I don't know if that was on camera or off camera, or on mic or not.
It was so fun. It was so fun.
He's
a good guy.
We had such a gas with him at the Birth 2012.
Yeah, that was great.
He showed up. Everyone thought he wasn't coming. He loves this, too.
I didn't even know he was coming.
He loves the acts of God, you know, right? Because it was some kind of crazy storm, and he couldn't get out of the Ashland, Oregon airport, that little airport up there. He's trying to fly out of there.
Yeah, God lives in Oregon. Everybody knows
that. He must. God's country, right?
Yeah, God's country.
But anyhow, he found a way in Neale fashion, and he showed up, and it was just a gas.
Yeah, his limousine was outside.
It's all
3 doors.
You're right, 3-door limousine.
Great, fun guy, and an interesting man. And looking back on that 20 years legacy, phenomenal and profound. The impact, the depth and breadth of impact that body of work has had on the world is just phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal.
What I loved about those books when I read them. So this is my take. I'm not saying this is Neale's take or your take, but we always project some kind of personality or personal reality onto God. It's a character, like archetypal.
We don't see, of course, we can't see God or anything else as it is because we have no capacity to do that. We see God and we make God in our own image.
That's it. And the wisdom that came through the, I'm going to call it God character in that series was a personality that is so highly relatable. And look, Neale has said this. He said, look, don't think that what I was, sort of getting in my conversation with God is the truth. It was simply my experience.
My personal highest truth.
And it was also his personal process because it was a low point, and he was writing on a yellow notepad, legal pad. In
a tent or something.
Because he was homeless. He was trying to figure out what the heck it was all about. And that's what he got. So, but what I wanted to say about all this is what I loved at the time was it was a God I could relate to. And the God of my conditioning was not. you know, and it was such a liberating. I remember being so liberated.
Where you get the God you're willing to have.
Yeah. Yeah. It opened up doors.
Same thing can be said for love.
Yeah.
For relationships?
Well, it's also this evolutionary piece where, you know, the next, because you've always spoken about this as a capacity, right? Where we top out. There's only so much we can handle, and we top out. It's at the top of our sort of, you know, glass ceiling, the four walls of our construct, what we can handle.
What we can contain.
What we can contain. And the breakthrough moments where all of a sudden some kind of little portal opens up and there's new opportunity for a greater amount. And our container fills. I mean, our awareness, to use this analogy.
We have to grow our container.
Well, this is the piece that we're on, is that the idea that it's always growing and that we can consciously grow it, you know, by, for us, it's playing at our edge, you know, what for us is new, that we're always willing to risk what's known in favor of something that is yet to be discovered, and that becomes a mantra. It's a mantra for the show.
Your reach should always exceed your grasp. Should always take on something just a little bit beyond your comfort zone. Not enough to precipitate total crisis and meltdown, but just enough to get you to pull your hair out, sort of figuratively. I don't mean that literally.
You call it beautiful chaos, and I think that's right.
You want to be in beautiful chaos. You don't want to be in a chaos that is where things come at you at such a rate and at such a level that it is completely beyond our capacities to respond to, because that is crisis.
Right.
But we want to have small, beautiful crises of growth all of the time. And then we develop a capacity to hold more uncertainty, to hold more love, to hold more confusion, to hold more paradox. Things don't have to be black or white. As you know, when I was an adolescent, things had to be black or white. I cannot wear those shoes to school. I will die.
Right. You know,
everything was just very hard-edged.
Very tightly.
Yeah, you grow and you're suddenly able to hold more complexity without being overwhelmed or without feeling you have to shut down or without feeling do you know what I mean by all that?
Totally.
So we grow that capacity to become more and more and more, and we grow into our greater selves. And there's no end to it.
That's the good news, as we were saying on the show. It's just
no end to
always evolving. There is an end, though.
There's an end to this show. No matter how much we love, no matter how much we grow, we're going to be out at the curb in a few minutes because somebody's outside waiting for the next ring.
The spirit of that is there's always another show. And even when we talk in terms of lifetimes, it's like there is this perspective that this is not it. You're not just coming and clocking your 80 plus years or however long you decide to stay here. There's an ongoing, just like the next moment, whatever truth you're holding can give way to a higher truth, right? So,
but wait, there's more. You act now.
That's right. So we're going to surrender to this moment and say goodbye, but we invite you, of course, to tune in again and again and again, because we will keep coming back, and we hope that you will join us here again on Cutting Edge Consciousness. Thanks for listening.